Hi, my name is Peter Fiore, and today we're making a painting. It's going to be Winter Tangle. It's a spot that I go to quite a bit, and this particular tree has become a very important motif for me. It's a winter scene in December. There's a little bit of snow on the ground, not a lot, but it's the end of the day. It's the last few minutes of the day when the light is golden, and it's just coming in, raking in above the trees. And that's what I like about this. I like the way it's over my shoulder, the light, so it's flattening the shapes. Also, it's very warm against this coolish background. So I'm looking at that. I like, in the square format, putting the tree very centrally located. So it becomes, it's a portrait. It's more than just a painting of a tree. It's a painting of a personality or a presence. It's a soul. It's basically, it's a portrait of a person, but it's a tree. So putting it in the middle goes against all the rules. Now, with that, I have to figure out how am I going to make that interesting. So I have to figure out design, open up shapes, and move the light around in this picture so that I get an interesting painting. Now, if you want to know a little bit more about that, at the end of this DVD, included is some bonus material I did an interview that I did a little while back, and it's going to talk about the philosophy and a little bit of my thoughts on painting. So you'll get a little bit more insight into why I think and why I make the paintings that I do. So enjoy and have a good time. Thank you. First thing I want to do is talk about my color palette. First thing I'm going to do is just go through this really quickly and tell you the colors that I'm using. Starting in the upper left, we have magenta, alizarin permanent, cadmium red deep, cadmium red light, cadmium orange, cadmium yellow, cadmium lemon, which is my cool yellow, yellow ochre, phthalo green, cobalt blue, ultramarine blue, and cobalt violet. On the left-hand side, we have terra rosa. Dark earth color I use is called Cassile earth. It's sort of umbery, but has a purplish tone, which I really like. And here, a straight raw umber. And over here in the bottom left, away from everything, is a larger volume of my titanium white. Okay, so let's get started. The first thing I'm going to do, brush-wise, I'm going to be using just an Omega. It's really a varnish brush for varnishing marine, meaning nautical things like boats and hulls and things like that. They have a whole series from that to these. These are all the same line. So I use these quite a bit. Obviously, it's bigger paintings. So this one, I'll start with this. It's nice to draw with. It's nice and supple and gives me a good amount of flexibility. I wet it down with just mineral spirits, take up a bunch of this Cassile earth. You can see that purple tone through it. It's coming through that. And I'm going to add to that just a little bit of the phthalo, just to deepen it down just a little bit and kill just a little bit of that purple. Okay, now here, the panel. It's a gessoed panel that's pre-made. And then what I do is I mixed a green, just a bunch of green oil paint that was just a little bit deeper than middle value. With that, I added a little bit of oil to it just so that when it went on, it wouldn't be too matte, it wouldn't be too absorbent. So now I'm going to work straight into that. So the first thing I'm going to do is try to do a tonal structure for the painting. And on top of that, we'll hang the color. Okay. First marks, here we go. Not really concerned with the intricacy of the drawing. I'm more interested in the division of space. Okay. All I'm trying to do is place the shapes, getting interesting, break up of how all of this is going to work. Using the side of the brush to make more linear type of statements. So I'm just doing linear statements just to block the space, okay? So let's see how this all goes and starts. Trying to think of shape division of these things and making these planes and the way they work together, these linear structures, just to get movement through this. I've already talked about the image so you know what we're working from. I know it's pretty crude, but that's all I need for this, is to get this suggestion of where things are. The shadow of the tree, of these branches coming up through here. Now I want to place this just a little bit more in terms of placement here. Let's see. This will come this way. And I'm looking at the negative shapes, not just the shapes that I'm making. I'm looking at the shapes between all of these things, how the patterning and variety works. Now, to the right of this tree, right to the right of this, there's another tree in the background, which is all in the shadow. So I want to start to indicate just that. And what I'm doing here, I'm just indicating the reflected light on the side of that tree, where that'll go. And this is basically a map mark, meaning it's not the final mark, it's just to let me know where to place that paint. Now I'm placing in the trunk, the base of this trunk. And it's quite a dark shape, and it's going to stop about here. Now I want to place the distance in this painting. But before I do that, let me just get a couple of these other things established. Okay. Now I have a distant tree line that goes way back, and I just want to start placing some of that. Let's see. Look at the shapes. I'm thinking of the pattern of these shapes so that it doesn't become all the same. And there's going to be distant light coming through here to suggest the openness of that. All right. Okay. Now the ground plane out here has to be suggested. And I'm going to see I'm putting this mark here to create that. And what I'm going to do is lightly bring that through here. So when I place the light here, if I do a little bit, it's the same ground plane behind everything. So as I'm doing this and blocking, I'm already thinking of the space of the picture. It's not like something, oh, I'll add in later. It's right from the very beginning. Okay. Now up in here, the upper right, I have a break in the sky. It'll be, of all this, will be a very active painting with a lot of value and color and strong stuff. This is the part of the sky, it'll be very quiet. The area of painting that has all the calm, right up in here. Okay? Okay. So that's the linear block-in. That's what did it take me, a couple of minutes to do that. It's not about drawing. It's about breaking up the space and dividing the shape so I know where to hang the color. Okay? All right, so now we're going to start adding just a little bit more, deepening this same color. Here again, the Viridian and the Conceal Earth, adding much more to this brush, getting it much bigger body of paint on this. Same brush I'm going to use. The first thing I'm going to do is put in my darks around everything so that I can see the tree come forward. Okay? So the first thing I'm going to do is start blocking all this stuff. This tree is the dark tree, so that comes in real quick. The ground plane in here, very loose. I know it looks like I'm making a mess, and it looks like, what is he doing? But that's what you do, because I made the drawing once, I can make it 1,000 times. If I lose it, that's fine. Don't be afraid of that. It's not the precious part of the painting. Ta-da, done. Okay, we're home. No, not quite. Now, what I'm going to do, okay, good. Now I'm going to come in here and just lightly start to delineate some of these structures in here. There's a little bit of light in here, a little bit of shadow coming across that. Okay. Now I'm going to put a lot of these marks together. What I'm going to use is this fan brush. It's a mongoose haired sand brush, which is quite soft, and this will allow quite a bit of blending of some of these marks to soften that. Then I can go back and reestablish a lot of my marks. Okay, so here we go. We're just going to basically take down the ridges of much of this paint and bring some of these shapes together. Oops. See what that does? Automatically, as soon as you get rid of the marks of the paint, there's an atmosphere that's created really quickly. I'm using the brush to pick up some of this paint just to give the bottom of this tree a tonality to it. Now I'm going to take a rag, just my paper towel, which are Viva paper towels. And I'm just going to make a sort of a, just a little bit of a texture. There you go. Just a little bit of a padding to it so I can move the paint around and take away paint. So the first thing I'm going to do, one of the earliest things, I know there's a wonderfully lit branch through here, so I just want to kind of like get the idea of where that's going to be. I'm also removing this darkest dark paint, so when I put light color on there, it's not going to dirty that up too much. Okay. Grabbing some more of this color. And all I want to do now, again, is to start to come back. I'm going to use a smaller brush this time. Just a typical, in this case, this is a Winsor Newton, what is this thing, a filbert. Mixing the same color. A little more dimensional paint. This was a little wetter prior. Now I'm just going to make a little bit more dimensional. Okay, so here I'm going to do, I'm placing this shape where I want that. Now I got to erase part of that. Okay, that's going to be the lit branch. And now I'm going to come in and work around that shape. Here's the shadow of that. All of this is going to be pushed back ever so lightly. So I'm just going to put some tone into this so that when I come back and model it, I can get some halftones. See, now I'm shaping these actual pieces that I pushed away with the rag. I can come in here now and be more specific about the anatomy of those shapes. See that? Again, drawing the negative shape around it. Right now I'm still establishing the space, so that's why I'm working negatively. I'm working pulling and pushing to get the shapes. And then when I add the color, that'll be additive. I won't be subtracting anymore. This is now what I'm doing is subtracting color. There's additive and subtractive, and this is very much, when I'm doing this mark, I'm adding, and then I'm subtracting by wiping. The way that cuts into here. A little shadow on there. Now we have some branches that come, little pieces that come off of this. Ground plane out here to establish that. A little bit of a tone in here. Now I want to come back and draw this in just a little bit. Figure out a little bit more where that's going to go. Okay, now again, thinking always about the value structure of all of this, where things are going to be and go. Okay, again, I'm going to pick up that fan brush, pick up a little of this, and soften some of these marks again. Now I'm going to drag across the painting to give me that halftone that I'm looking for, just a slight knocking it back so that the green now has a little variation in it, in the light form. See? I'm just giving myself a little bit of a tone in there. See, I want this to be the brightest part of the painting. This will be in the light, but down a little bit, so this is already a little brighter, that'll be down. These areas on the outside here, this shape, a little bit of this, and in here, I want those to be super brilliant because I want this to be a circular pattern around the tree. So right away, I'm starting to think of those final marks, how they're going to be at the very beginning. And now establishing just some tonality down here so we can see this. So I'm going to indicate now, again, with this tonal mixture, just a little bit of solvent here to loosen it up a little. Now I want to indicate this darker ground down in here so I can have this tree come forward. See? That helps with that. This down here establishes this tree. And I want to make, just trying to get some interesting shapes that come off of all of this. But what you do is you're planning these marks, hopefully to orchestrate what you're looking for. Okay, and I'm, again, just bringing it together. We're pretty close now to a point where I can start thinking about adding some color to this. Okay, so I basically have a color space, I should say a tonal space, a light space, that is starting to feel pretty good in terms of what I'm looking for in the final painting. Okay, good. Okay, now we'll come over here, back to the palette. And the first thing I want to do is clean up some brushes. Always clean them out because this is a very dark color, and if I don't get it really out of here, it's going to pollute everything. Okay. You get it all out so it's clear solvent, nothing making a mark on the paper. Same thing with this brush. Always wipe out the excessive pigment prior, because if you don't, you're going to pollute your solvent in a hurry. Darken it up unnecessarily. See? And that's fairly clean. Okay, now clean off the palette. Just use a big scraper. I've been using this one for years. It just makes it so much easier than to wipe. You want to get rid of this, and then if need to, you can wipe down the palette with some alcohol, which will get everything off, denatured alcohol. But this is pretty good right now. Paper towels I'm using are Viva paper towels. They're soft enough to be cloth-like. All right, so let's see. Now, the first thing we're going to do with color, okay, I'm going to take up, I'm going to get a brush. This is an old Langnickel flat that I have, which they don't make them anymore. At least they don't import them to the United States anymore. It's got some, it's a little beat up. This is a really interesting one. Same brush, really beaten up. And this one I use quite a bit to create ragged textures. This one still has quite a bit of it, and it's just starting to get interesting because I can get this really thin to make some interesting marks. And then here's one that has been beaten up, a little smaller in size, but these all started out as beautiful brushes at one time, but as they get worn down, they become more interesting tools for me. Okay. So I'm going to pick up a yellow ochre here. Little Terra Rosa. Now I want to knock that back a bit. I'm going to add a little bit of green to it. A little bit of raw umber. Just a touch of blue. Just a little bit to deepen that down. Just to knock the chroma just a little off without changing the value too much. Just to see what this does. I know this looks very dark here on the palette. But on this painting, which is a middle to dark ground, this is going to seem much more luminous. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do up here is to make a mark somewhere on here to establish how light or dark this really is. So there we go. Here's the first mark. I don't know if you can see that so clearly, but that's a good place to put it too. It's not the super bright area, so I can start there. So I'm going to just indicate just some touches some of this looser paint, just to get at this painting here, it's a transition from shadow to light. This is the most brilliant spot, okay? So I'm just going to introduce some of this down in here. Now I'm going to add a little bit more, just a cat orange to this to bring it up a little bit chromatically. A little more terra rosa. So now we have a color that's getting a little bit warmer. So I just want to put these on in here to start to indicate some of this light that's between the shadow and the super bright. Here we go. This is ever so lightly. I'm just dragging color very loosely over this. Just taking it off the green. And my fingernail, if you can see this, caught a little of this stuff, which is interesting. Catching up the paint. And I'm painting across the form. It just creates a nice way to break down that without having to draw it yet. Okay, so now, again, I just want to define little things. Little shapes, little changes. This is the first piece of paint I'm going to put down some more. That hopefully can work. There we go. That's a nice piece of light right there. So I'm just starting to place that somewhere that I can start to calculate how this is going to work with the rest of the painting. And what I'm going to do here, again, is start to indicate it on this branch. Just a little bit. I'm going to work from a little bit of the background now. And I want to include the sky now. So what I'm going to do in this one, I'm going to take titanium white, add some cobalt blue, ultramarine, a little cobalt violet, just a touch. A little more cobalt, take it down a little bit, a little more of the ultramarine, and we'll see what this looks like. A little bit of that yellow's in my brush, so it's going to just knock that back a little bit so it's not so raw. There we go. I just want to place some of these shapes here. Let's see what that looks like. Good. That works. And I'm thinking of just the negative shape of this. I'm not thinking sky. I'm just thinking carving into the dark. Because I'm working with the right value and painting away the negative shapes, it starts to bring forward things. Like here, see, this is a branch that I didn't paint. I didn't paint the branch. I paint around the branch, which made the branch come forward. So that's negative painting. Sometimes it's fun to look and see how you can do that in your painting. It creates more interest for you and the viewer. See, that's a nice spot of just the opening of the sky. So already when you look at this, the main subject is right in the middle. Then the atmosphere is established. Now I want to start thinking about this ground plane here that's working, just to get the space. So now what I'm going to do, into this same mixture that I was using for the sky, because the sky color influences what's on the ground plane. Whatever in the sky influences the ground. So here in this case, I'm going to do the same color mixture, but deeper. Just a little bit deeper. Again. I'm going to add just a touch, just a little bit of terra rosa into that. Just a little bit just to mellow that mixture, just a touch, just a little bit. Okay. Ground plane is through here, so I got to see, where can I start this? Just make a mark. There we go. It's a snow field. So now a little bit deeper. Again, I'm going to put a little of that Terra Rosa in here just to deepen it just a little bit. Now, the reason I'm deepening this is it's going to be on the left side of the painting in the distance. I'm trying to get that to line up so you get a sense of continuity through the painting. So that ground plane is pretty equal through here. Now I'm going to put a little bit of this darker tone in here because this is in the shadow, in the foreground, just to indicate some of this stuff really loosely, just to give me a little bit of a break in here so it's not so flat. The snow on the ground here, and very little over here, if at all, because I want this to be so much more away from all that in the shadow area, more grass cover. But see, that's starting to suggest the ground plane already. So we got space with a minimum amount of effort started. Okay, now quick. Okay. All right, so let's go for some of the brighter notes now. Again, I'm going to get, this is the brush I'm going to work with here. I'm going to pick up the yellow ochre again, cad yellow, and cad orange, a little bit of burnt umber. A little bit of white to that. White, it's amazing. Did you see that? As soon as I added white to that, how much cooler that became. It cooled it off quite a bit. Let me show you that. I'm going to do this ochre and orange mixture, right? Pretty warm. But watch this. I add white to this. Look how much cooler that becomes. White is like the coolest color on your palette. So you have to account for that. So when you're lightening with white, the best thing is to try to lighten with another color. So if you have an orange, you want to lighten an orange, go with a yellow or an ochre. It'll lighten it without cooling off the color. So that's what we're going to do. Add a little bit of that orange back into this. That's the brightest spot of the painting. So everything comes down from there. Again, everything, like I said, comes down from there. So I'm adding a little bit of umber to that now, so this is not nearly as intense as it is up here. Related, but not as intense. I'm just trying to get the main body of this going, of the tree, and establish where all that is. Again, I'm going to add a little bit more of that light in here. And here I'm going to use a soft mongoose hair flat that's dry and no pigment in it, just to soften some of these marks so that I can see the texture of what's going on up here. Now I'm going to pick up again the yellow, cad yellow, and a little bit of the ochre, cad red. This is like, I'm really picking up quite a bit of pigment here, if you can see that, right through here, because I want to really load the brush to make some of these marks now. Okay, so now I've established this just a little bit, so I want to come in now with some other values to get this working. So let's see, cad orange and an umber, a little bit of ochre, a little bit of blue, just to knock that back and see what this does. See, that branch is now, it's in the light, but because it's bending forward, it doesn't catch the light quite the same as the main body of the trunk, which is flat. So it's catching that. Now I've got to establish this over here. I'm going to put a little, I'm going to really mix it up here. I'm going to mix an orange and a green to do that branch. A little bit of an ochre, just to get this started here. I'm going to place some of these notes in here in green, of greens. I should talk a little bit about the color and what I'm doing. I'm not so much trying to paint exactly what I see. I'm trying to paint the feeling of what I see. Now, what does that mean? Well, that means the artist that you are has to have a little bit of a point of view or an opinion about what you're painting. Because if we all just sit there and paint exactly what we're seeing, it's like, okay. But there comes a time, maybe for me it came a time where I wanted to start to say a little bit more. So they become more personal statements. Now I'm going to add to this, there's a branch that comes across here. I want to indicate that now. So I'm going to come in here with a cad orange and a terra rosa, a little bit of an umber, really, and a blue just to knock that back a little bit. You can see that mixture right here? Neutralize that right away. Blue against the orange neutralizes the color. Now I'm going to hold this brush at the back of the handle here to create more of a linear movement. Lightening the touch to let it go behind. Now I got to put light on that branch. There's light sunlight catching that. So cad yellow and orange, just a touch of that green, just a little bit. This mark I want to be brighter than this right now. Doesn't mean it'll stay that way, but I want to make that comment, make that statement that that's in front of. And now to suggest that shape. Okay, there we go. And slightly, just a little bit here. Just a little bit there, and let that light dissipate and fly away. Now I want to do is this branch. Now this branch, I've got it a little bit too wide, so I'm going to knock that down a little bit. But I'll do that not by painting the dark, by painting light into it narrower than that's there. So let's start with that orange again. Little terra rosa and this cad orange. And let's see, what can I do? A little bit of a cobalt blue in that, just a touch. We'll start here. Probably the camera that's directly behind me. This camera is probably picking up a lot of glare here because that's it's closest to my point of view. So I'm going to knock that back because it's a little too intense of a highlight glare. So there you go. Now I'm going to pick up cad yellow and orange into that mixture, just a touch, to place this color right here. A little bit more of an orange. With a small little brush, it's another Lang nickel, which is just a smaller flat. It allows me to pick up paint that's soft, and I can paint and draw into this paint. Now up here, I'm going to suggest a color that suggests just a little bit of a change. I'm going to use magenta, cobalt blue, with a little bit of white, which creates this nice lavender. But I use a little green, which is the complement, which knocks that back a little bit, so it's not so chromatic. If you find that your colors are too rich and like they're overpoweringly strong, use the complementary color. Complement of magenta is a green, so that's why I mix that in there. And it neutralizes it a little bit. And I have a lighter value because I want this to be light on it, but it's suggesting a bare part of the tree as the branch is stripped slightly. Now I'm going to come back with the conceal earth and a little bit of green. purple, just a touch. Really strengthen that a little bit to indicate this dark. See? And I did that so I can get a soft edge at the very top of that. That works pretty well there. I'm adding some darks into this. So it's like, it suggests the gnarled part of the wood. Wood is not, it's not manufactured. This is a growing tree that's got marks and dings, and so I want to indicate that. Now I'm going to also put here this light shape against this light shape. If that's in front, there's got to be a shadow. So I'm going to put a shadow right here to place that down, so that now that's in front of, sits down on that. This is all very wet paint. There we go. Now, I want to draw the base of some of these branches where they meet here. A little bit more specificity of how this branch meets there. So I'm going to bring this down just a little bit. Draw the bottom of that, state the bottom. Bring a little bit of that light up into here. Now that shadow has to go, of the shadow of that branch has to be restated. So I'm going to pick up this purplish mix, a little bit of orange into it. So it takes it slightly toward a green. Yeah. What I did, I flattened the brush so I get an edge. You can see that. See the difference? That's the width of the brush. And by dragging it through the paint, I made a good edge so I can draw with that edge now. Now I'm going to come in very strong chromatic color right here. Cad yellow, a little bit of orange, and just a touch of ochre. So I'm just going to make a couple of marks here now. And everything comes down from that area. I'm just dragging that out, but I'm still thinking that's like where the brightest spot on this will be. Again, building off of that, we have this in now. This is going to be the brightest spot. I'm going to introduce just a little bit more of that here, bringing that down into here. By placing this, I'm rolling the brush to create different kinds of textures. And the base of this is right here. That's the most intense part of the light. So I'm also going to take just a touch of magenta and mix it into that. So we can get like just a little bit of a different change, color temperature change here. See how that just gives it a little bit of a difference to it, so it has a little bit of nuance to it. You constantly want to give variety to your paint, so it's not all the same everywhere. Okay? Now what I want to do is bring the light here just a little bit more. So here, I'm going to use the little bigger flat for this. Again, Terra Rosa and a little bit of green, mix it into here. What I'm going to do is bring this out. Again, dragging across. And I can still mix up some more of that. I have it here. I'm going to bring this up just a little bit more. Now I'm going to pick up another mixture to go a little higher up. Now I'm deepening it a little bit by adding a little bit of this darker mixture. Same relatively space, but see how this now, look at this. It suggests the light falling off, but it's all part of the same palette. Now just a little bit more intensity here, just a touch, a little bit of that ochre. It's a little bit, the value is a little bit up from the green that's around it, because it also separates because it's red against this green. But I don't want it to be as intense as what's below. I'm going to introduce this ever so slightly right here. Okay, now I want to start bringing some of this down into the base of the picture here. So I gotta mix up a deeper value of that. So here we go. We're mixing up umber, a little bit of that concealer with a touch of alizarin, just a little bit. And what I'm going to do is just lightly, I'm not putting down heavy, I'm not trying to coat this whole thing, I'm lightly dragging the brush to mingle with what I have underneath so the paint stays thin. I don't want to get this really heavy, otherwise it just chokes the surface. So I don't want that. Nice and light. Now I'm going to introduce some of this into here, up through here just a little bit, to make this transition. Remember, there's another tree. I know I haven't even done anything about it yet, but there's still a tree back in here that I want to get to. Now I'm going to take a fan brush, dry and clean, and all I'm going to do with that is just very lightly in here, I'm going to suggest the reflected light of the sky coming into this tree. So I'm just going to push away some of that paint. It just kind of suggests where that's going to be. So it gives me a place to put it. So now let's see, let's get some greens going in here. Darker green, I'm going to use that phthalo green with umber. And just a touch of ochre, just to brighten up, and a little bit of red, just to dirty it up. A nice dark mixture here. Now I'm going to start placing some of these greens in here. Dry, just a little bit over this to create some more complexity of the sky. So I'm dry brushing again. It's all very lightly adding paint into this wet area. And then over here, I can come in with a little bit more green that's visible, because against the sky, you're going to start to see some of the color. So here, just little bits, little pieces in that. It suggests little pieces of the tree that are just there. Just the light is etching and cutting into that. Now I'm going to bring some of that down in here. And in here, I'm going to open up a tree line that's a little bit brighter back in there. So to that, I'm going to add ochre, a little bit of orange, lighten it up a value, just a touch of white, just a little bit. There we go. There we go. And that just opens up this whole area now that there's something behind this tree and the trees in between. All of this is very much suggestion. And all of it is building the space. Little by little, you start carving up the big shapes with medium shapes. And then you start carving into those medium shapes with smaller shapes. But you build the bigger shapes first. Without that, you have nowhere to go. You have nowhere to hang anything. So let's see. A little bit of that into here, just a touch. I'm trying to, here, this is going to be the tree, the reflected light in that tree is going to be here. So I'm painting just to the right edge of that tree. Now over here, I'm going to add just a little bit of blue to that, and a little bit of purple, and that just deepens it and gives it like a sort of a muddy color, which I kind of don't mind. And what I want to do with that is start indicating some of this stuff in here, just a little bit. That's where that background atmosphere is going to be here. Go back to the green just a little bit and push some of that through here. Now in my reference, there's some suggestion of sky, distant sky in here. So I'm going to place some of that now. This is deep shadow. This is open sky. The sky holes of the back in here, I cannot paint them. I shouldn't paint them the same value as that. They would look like headlights coming out of here. So I'm going to knock those down several values so that they stay behind the trees. If I make them as bright as this guy, they're going to race out of there way too bright. I'm going to take ultramarine blue, white. To that, I'm going to add a little magenta. Take it down. I know that's really, now that's, like, see this color? That's about the right value, but way, way, way too chromatic. So it's a bluish violet. What I'm going to do, I'm going to put a slight orange to this, orange red, just to kill that back just a little bit. There we go. Just a little bit, knocks it back, a little bit of a umber. There we go. A little warmer, but that's fine. A little deeper. There we go. Now that looks so much, on the white palette, that looks so dark. I know it does. But against this dark area, it's going to seem quite a bit brighter. See? Look at these little marks here now. Just to suggest the sky in the distance coming through all of this. I'm going to introduce some sky in here too. Now I'm going to introduce some more of these branches and start fleshing this tree out a little more so. Light touch, just to suggest this. I'm using the side of the brush to pat the color. I don't want to drag the paint too much. I just want to place these strokes, these little color notes. Like I said, I'm going to flesh out more of these branches. I may shut up for a little bit, just a little bit, so that I can fly through this just a little quicker. But all the time I'm thinking about everything I place is light, but dissipating from here. That's the most intense spot I want in this picture. Here I'm using a very strong cad, orange, red, to give it a little bit of life to that. And now let's see, white. White and cad yellow into that red. Now let's build this out. And now I'm going to bring this down. I'm going to make this just a little bit deeper down. Starts here. Now the transition from this bright yellow to this darker color, I'm using a little bit of an orange. So it's like an in-between value in color, temperature change. Now I'm going to here, this is something I love to do with paint. I have a texture in this, and I just want to increase the chromatic quality of that, just using the paint and rolling the brush to create a texture. Squinting is good, gives you a little bit of better idea of what you've got going. Backing off from your painting is good to see where things are. And squinting at the same time. This is a branch that goes way back in here. Now I have some really intense light on this side, and I decided, as much as I like that, and I do, I want this to have a really sense of luminosity through here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to pick up white, a good amount of paint. Now I'm going to show you this. Look at the amount of white I got on this brush here. All right? Titanium white with the cad yellow. Really mix up a big pile of this. Wipe it off the brush. I want to get it clean. Now I'm going to pick that up. Really load this brush up. I'm going to figure out where I'm going to start this. I'm going to place it about here and make a pull. Okay, let's see what we get. There we go. Look at that. Just like that whole branch is illuminated. Now, that's one tone, but I want to give it a little bit more intensity here. So I'm going to come in with white and lemon yellow, which is the coolest yellow. And a lot of white paint. And right here, just gives that little edge just a little bit more intensity. Up here, I'm going to do white with a touch of magenta and that lemon yellow, but mostly the magenta, light magenta, very light. Because I want to create the different color space, something in here. So I got to be careful now. Let's see, it started here. This is an old beat up Lang nickel brush that is not much left to it. But it's good for making a very small mark into wet paint. Let me clean this handle here just a little bit. I'm going to do it this way so you can see it. Against that, you should be able to see this. It's a nice brush. It's worn down quite a bit. But because of that taper, it's going to give me the feel I can go with a wide stroke, and as turning it, I can get a very small stroke out of that. So that's what I want to use here. So I'm going to pick up an orange. Terra Rosa, just an orange. There we go. Just a little bit of that. Come into here now. And off of this. What you do is you put it down and commit yourself to it. You know, don't worry about it too much. It's like you've got to be in that moment, meaning you put the brush down and do it. If you do that, hesitate and look and see, you got to know where you're going. If you have to, do a dress rehearsal for yourself, where you put it down above the painting and figure out, is it going to go this way, is it going to go that way? Rehearse that so when you do it, it's fluid and it stays in the context of the painting. Otherwise, it's going to look herky-jerky, it's going to look stiff. And it'll look overly forced and not work. and not work at all for you. Okay, let's see. Now in here I want to add some more color into this, because this is the tree that's catching the light right before this. It's going to be the most intense here and here. Okay, now over here at the end of this tree, this branch is a broken branch. So what I'm going to do here is give it a sense of like a hollow in there. Just a little bit. There we go. And now I can start to just suggest a lot of these kinds of things up in here. Things breaking across, a little more ragged with a brush. So here I'm not making it so clean. I loaded this brush up quite a bit, and I let that ragged edge stay that way, so when I put the paint down, it made me an irregular surface, an irregular edge to it, which I like. Again, I'm going to put in some things that are coming darker across here. So let's see, this is going to come across. Okay, so what I'm doing here, I want to flesh out the base of this tree before I go too much more into building of it, all around it. So let's just see what we can do here. I'm mixing up a bunch of red, deeper, darker reds, just to introduce this and widen this a little bit. Now I'm going to put this branch behind this trunk of the tree. See, that works. Okay. I'm mixing up a dark here again, because I want to draw and set the shadow for this tree over here, this branch coming out of the tree. Conceal earth and the viridian makes a nice dark. Not that, yeah, conceal earth and the viridian works well. Okay. There we go. Okay. Okay, and I'm still working into this tree trunk down in here to give this some texture and some variety. It's a little cooler on this side. So, still shaping and forming all this. I like the way the light travels around the image, catching branches on the outside of everything and creating almost sort of this web of color and light. And let's see, there's a branch here. There we go. Shadow of the branch on this one, coming across this branch. Create a little depth. Now there's a shadow of this cross branch I want to include in here just a little bit. There we go. Also, I don't know if you can tell with a lot of these shots, but there's a lot of ways to hold a brush, okay? It's just not one way. I hold a brush to draw with the stroke this way. I will hold it many times down this to roll the brush to get an interesting texture. This way, punch the brush. There's many different ways. Play with the brush and see what kind of marks you can make. Down in here, we have another big branch I want to start to include here. Now I'm going to come over here and introduce, a phthalo with a cad red. Wow, what a mixture that is. It makes a earthiness color to it. It's a grayish green, which works good in here. It almost comes off as a very warm tone compared to what's here. I got to start establishing again now some of this grass growing out here because I got the snow down. I let that set for a little bit. Now I want to do the grass on top of it. So into this, I'm going to take that Conceal Earth again, a little cad red, a little alizarin, and start to scumble. I'm using a real ratty brush. If you don't have one of these, go down to the ratty brush store, and they'll think you're nuts. But you make your own ratty brush. If you can see that, it's pretty beat up, and it's good for these things. Now, here we go. I'm just going to start to introduce this over this color, and I'm not really worrying about it too much. I just want to get some texture through here, indicating the grasses in the background. Again, now paying attention, there's an edge to it, the shadow, the tree in the shadow right here, so I don't want to come in that far. I'm going to leave part of that so that you can understand the space. See how that helps define that? Okay, now, on the other side, I've got to work into that other side a little deeper, because that's on the shadow side of the tray. What happens is now this dark that I put down earlier has gotten somewhat stickier, which is really wonderful to work into. It gives me a little bit of a resistance, something to grab. You know, these are the kinds of things, the tactile sensibilities of the paint. You have to figure out what works and how that works for you. Some people want to always know that their brush is sliding into wet paint. I like it all different ways because I like the variety of it, and I try to make it all work for me at different times. Now, here we go. Now look at this. You're going to see from here, this color and value is pretty close. So what I'm going to do is just lightly, just pull that together just a little bit, just so I can see that really, how much glare there is or not. Okay, I want to go deeper now on the tree that's there. Okay, here I'm going to take ultramarine blue and the concealer with a real good dark. A little bit of the purple and viridian, make it dark, dark. Okay, and what I'm going to do is start right here and introduce that. Remember, you're dark, so it sets up the form. You can't have light unless you have darks first. The darks are where the light builds off of. You can't start with your lights, you got to start with the darks. Now there's a tree, that distant tree's got a little bit of light on it in here. So ever so lightly, I'm going to push that in here. Now I'm going to start to indicate this tree, these trees in the background, the distant space. So I'm going in with a dark, a little more physical paint to build into that, to suggest trees in front of all of this. Here's a wider tree, a narrow one here. But looking at this space, I'm just trying to now move some of this color around and harmonize things and break edges and move some paint around. Now, I know this may sound a little premature, but I'm already thinking about how much to do on this to call finish. Okay? Basically, everything that I wanted to establish is there in terms of information for the space. Now it's a matter of how much do I want to finish the painting. And this is where now, it's like building a house. The foundation goes in, the framing goes up, the roof goes on, the siding goes on, the house looks finished. Then it takes 4 months to finish the house because it's all internal. Those are the little marks now that go over on and on and on for a period of, it could be a day, 2 days, put the painting away, let it dry for a few days, then come back because now you're working with a different level of texture to the paint. That's all up to you. But I'm going to go straight into this and forge on through. So here we go. So let's get some more of this going. Soften some of this. Deepen up in here a little bit to really push that light, bring that light back down. And because the paint is wet, it's very malleable. It allows me a whole bunch of manipulation, which is wonderful. Now I want to, with a softer brush, I want to bring down some of that light into the bottom part of the tree, just a little bit. Mixing up into this warm and just mixing up a value that's a little bit muddy. It'll work like a stronger color because I have a lot of darker colors. If you remember looking at the reference picture, there's a lot of vines growing on this tree. So now I'm getting to the point where I'm going to start setting up for that. Now there's a little bit of coolness coming into the picture down here. So here I'm going to go with a purple. And then deepening that with a little bit of a green. Again, I'm going back to play with the grass now because it just feels like it's the right time to do that. I don't paint something and then finish it and move on. It's like I touch all the areas at various times until it feels right for that moment and then move on. Because painting for me is a visual balance. So sometimes things work and you have to balance it with something else, and it's not all that predictable. Especially if you're a kind of a painter, which I am, is where I make something and I also do a lot of responding to what I made as opposed to what it's supposed to be. Now here I'm putting this warmer red over it to catch these ragged grasses. But it's also under there's that green that originally was the tone of the board coming through, which gives it a little bit of life, which is something that it makes it visually exciting. Now there's a vine that comes across this picture. Let's see if we can do this. I'm just mixing up a lighter value here, a little magenta and white and some yellow. There we go. I'm going to bring this across here. As it comes down, I'm going to deepen it, but not just dark. I'm going to go with color. There we go. Now there's some more of these vines growing through here, so let me start placing some of those. They wrap around these limbs, and again, making those marks. There we go. The width of that tree is established. I'm going to go a little bit lighter on this one branch here. Just a little bit. Okay. I'm just going to create the distance space a little bit more. Dragging some of this color across. Okay, now I want to work a little bit over here to suggest the openness of these trees. So remember, let's see, we had this here. I want to suggest now let's get some light into the back in there. But this can go pretty deep as a warm tone and still have a sense of light because it's deeper, so darker back here. Got to get some more color here to conceal earth. Okay, here now I can start to indicate the branches that come across in space, in the distance. Come back to that. Now this is getting a little heavy through here. Same thing here, put a little shadow on that tree over that branch. Okay, so we have a knife edge on this. And what I'm going to do is to start to place the vine coming down here. And place a few of these in here. Some of these have an overlap. So this kind of, it's interesting, this kind of painting, you know, when you paint as directly as you can, as you know, it's known as alla prima. But none of my paintings truly are in one pass, alla prima. I tend to let things dry and go back and paint more into them. So I'm sure this will be no different in terms of how I paint. Branches coming off, many layers and complexities of layers of color. Okay, now I'm just going to put in the reflected light. I know it's been a while since I talked about it, but the reflected light of the back tree. It's going to be subtle, but it's just enough to space it, put it in there. A little lighter. There we go. I know it's, I don't even know if the camera's going to pick this up, but by eye you can see it. It's quite a bit bluish purple color coming in to suggest the fill light of the sky coming across and catching that entire tree in shadow. So subtle, but very effective. Now I want to suggest a tree line that's even further back. And there's a little bit of separation in there. Okay. There's a bunch of tree trunks and branches and all kinds of interesting things in the shadow. So these can be all variations of different temperatures, deeper in value. So I can do almost anything I want here. As long as it stays down in value, it's going to sit back there. And that's what I'm going to do. All variety of these. I put one that comes across here and matches up in here. And I'll put a little bit of light on that in a minute. But in the meantime, I can come across here quite a bit, actually. A lot of random, raggedy things going on, which create all these wonderful textures that branches in the shadows and break and grow. I love painting trees that are uncultivated, meaning left alone and just grow wild. Nature does an amazing thing with how it grows and how it breaks. I've been visiting this tree now for, I would say, about 3 or 4 years now, or will be 4 years. So what happens? These things become kind of familiar places, and you get to learn the personality of this tree. Now I'm going to put some light on this branch, right? So here we go. As it comes in, I'm going to go very light, because I don't want this to be as light as on this side. There's where it meets. I mean, this is really a small brush. It's a liner. Yes, people, I do own something like that. Little spot of color here. Now I'm just moving around and placing light in different places just to give it some dimension to these things. I'm going to say the worst possible thing as to how to place those. There's no formula. I know this is the worst thing to hear, but it's the truth. It's if it feels right. And that only comes from painting, and then painting, and then painting, and then painting some more. Because if you're looking for a specific answer, that doesn't exist. You'll know, because you'll just feel the balance. You need the balance. What balance you need in this. Okay, so let's see what we got left. Now I'm going to put some of this grass up in here. That's growing. Catching some of that light. Let's go gotta knock that back just a touch. There we go. There we go. Good. Now, I'm going to use a smallish knife just to create, I want to do some stuff with knife, placing some colors in with a knife. Now with this, I'm just going to go through the paint, take it off the front edge. And on the back edge, I have a nice roll of paint. Now what I'm just going to do is start placing in some small marks. I'm drawing with the knife as I go. It's interesting, into wet paint you get a whole different set of textures going. Little branches, fine little twigs, all this stuff that's growing in here to create this raggedness to it. Now the deeper value I can do on this side. Now I'm just going to scrape through here a little bit to let some of that ground green come through that was here. Okay, so I let the painting set up for a little bit, and what's happening now is that the ground is absorbing a little bit of that oil, so it's matted out. Some of my colors are very glossy, or I've had some extra oil in the paint, and some are very flat, where I've used a lot more thinner. So what I need to do to even that out so I can judge the values correctly, I'm going to do a retouch varnish. So I'm going to go out and do that now. And what I'm going to use for retouch varnish, I use a Kmart varnish. It's made by Krylon, and it's not a final varnish. It's just meant to restore the values to where they were when the paint was wet and looked wet, so we can make proper adjustments to color and value. Okay, so I'm going to go do that now, and off I go. Okay, so now that I've sprayed this, you can see all the values have been restored. Painting looks just as it was when it was freshly painted wet. And it doesn't take long for that to sink in, the paint. So you got to watch your paint as you're going if you got in a long day. A lot of the paint I use a lot of, the brand of paint I use is 1862 Lucas paints. And what I like about their paint is that it's fairly rapid dryer because they add beeswax to the paint. So that tends to have a matting effect, which is something that I do like. But when I'm working, I want to make sure that I have that wet look so that when I make the next statements, they're accurate and they'll dry equally as what's beneath it. All right, so what I want to do now, again, is to start to establish more of what's going on around here. So I'm going to take just a little bit of white and some cat orange here, just a little bit to pale it out, and then maybe a little magenta just to give it a little snap to it. There we go. It's not quite a red, it's not an orange, it's a yellow with a little bit of magenta, which just gives it a different kind of luminosity. Now I'm using a small bristle brush here. I'm just going to put some paint on this. I'm going to use this card so you can clearly see what I'm doing. Just a little bit of paint, put it mostly on the tip of that brush. And now I want to come in here and start to think about little touches as where I want to place this. Now I have this sort of magenta branch going here, but I just want to give it a little bit of a pop. Not everywhere, just in a couple of spots. So it feels like it should be like along here somewhere. So I'm just going to place that paint lightly. Drags like dots. I'm not making a continuous line. I'm letting it break and move so that it's very much the way nature moves. Nature is not usually a continuous tone, but there's little facets of color that break and move. So that's working pretty well there. Now I'm going to try to include some of that up in here, just to make some of these things move just a little bit more. Okay, so I'm not finished with this idea, but I just want to now expand some of the branches further before I get too involved with that kind of touching. Okay, good. Now I'm using an umber, a little bit of green, just a touch of orange just to lighten that up a little bit, but the orange doesn't overpower the mixture, so it becomes a warmer green. It's a nice way of neutralizing. See, if you notice on my palette, I have one green. And the reason I have one green, it's a transparent green, a very vibrant green, phthalo green. Now, I'm just going to take that right out and just show this to you here. It's really, unto itself, it's a very sickening color in terms of it's a synthetic green. But it's not the greens that I have in my palette, it's all these other colors that I have to modify that green to make it work. See, I can put a little bit of a warm yellow into that and make that a very vibrant green. I could do the same thing with the same green now and put this lemon green in, which creates a very acidic sort of green. And I can take the same green again and mix an orange into it, which softens it. These are all variations of the same green, out of the same green, so those are important. So now we've got these mixtures, I can use some of these. Okay, so let's pick this up again with the orange. Lighten it just a little bit. Now I'm going to come up here and start creating some different various temperature changes. So the light is over, the sky is out here, so I just want to give a little bit of lightness to some of these areas here that are around the sky. So it's like the sky lightening and moving and coming across the space and lightening some of this vegetation up. But not everywhere, just where it feels that it's appropriate. Again, shapes and space, always about shapes. Detail is implied by fracturing up the spaces and shapes to smaller shapes. You know, your eye, the viewer's eye, is a lot more sophisticated than anything you're going to paint. Meaning you can suggest many things and the eye will finish it. And that's the magic. People will say there's much more there than there really is. If you get your values right and your temperature correctly, and for the appropriate temperature for the spaces, it'll work really well. Okay. Now on this side I want to get into, again, some of those variations. Darkening it up with some of the earthy colors here. I'm putting in really some distant branches coming across shapes, so suggest shadows falling on objects and shapes. It could be very hard to see this on camera because we're talking, it's not at all a value change, it's totally temperature change. So now I'm going to add an ochre to it to lighten it up just a touch. There we go. Here I'm using an orange, cad orange, the cad yellow, and a little bit of white. And I'm just going to pick up ever so little bit this green that I had mixed earlier, just to push that in there to dampen the chromatic quality of that orange. A little bit of that darks. Here we go. There we go. Good. I'm going to use Terra Rosa into the same mixture and darken it just a little bit. A little more Terra Rosa here. I'm going to open up this shadow just a touch. There we go. Just a little bit more here. Now I've got this branch, this little vine that's going through here, so I got to create the shadow of it falling on that tree. So I'm going to use a small brush for that, and I'm just going to mix up just a little bit darker value than what's there. Let's see how this goes. Now that shadow is a little bit lighter. It's going to be a lighter shadow than this big branch shadow because it's a smaller shape and light is refracting and going around that. So it's not going to be as dark. But I can deepen it just a little here. Where it meets here. There we go. There we go. Fingers are good. Don't be afraid to use your fingers. Sometimes they're the best blenders. Okay, now for that vine that was there, I want to really make that stronger and pop that in. So I'm using magenta, a little Terra Rosa, and white. Come across. In front of, I can make a decision. In front of this branch or behind it, I'm going to put it in front of. And I'm going to tuck it behind this one. And this. And have this come down so slowly. So now we have this vine that's coming across here, creating a movement going this way. But it just doesn't start there. It actually comes down this tree this way. So what I'm going to do is start it with the same intensity as over here. And now I'm going to bring it down a little bit so it's not just a flat piece, so it has some dimension to it. So it comes down here behind these branches and let it fade off. See? And now you get the sense of out of the shadow into the light and across. Here, now I just want to dampen this down just a little bit as it trails off. See? Now it has some movement to it. And one bright highlight on it. Okay. Now I'm just, like I said, I'm just going to continue with making more branches in the distance here and fleshing out the wooded area. Little touches just to bring out detail and little movements through here. Okay. Now, I'll go on and do that for a while, but what I really want to do now is to get some more paint, heavier paint, on to the main tree to make that really dimensional and get that paint really, really, really heavy. So I'm going to start with a cad orange, and yellow ochre, and a little bit of white terra rosa, and really push this around. And really loading that brush up. This is the beat up brush. See that? I'm getting a lot of pigment on here. Really loading that up so you can see all that. Now, to make this make sense, I've got to have some of that coming out of here. Now, on this branch, on this branch over here, I want to make that really a brilliant piece of yellow. So cad yellow, white, a little orange. Soften this just a little bit of a green to it. What's he going to do with that? I'm going to show you. I'm going to do it over here. I'm going to put a little bit of that green over that. Now I've got this warm tone under it, so there's a little wonderful vibration going on. Now for over here, I want to really make since this palette is golden and greens and a little bit of blue, I want to put a surprise color in here. And I'm going to use magenta and white. And I'm just going to knock that back ever so slightly. I want it to go cooler, so I'm going to do something, instead of adding a blue to it, I'm going to add a little bit of this phthalo green, which, look at that. As soon as I put that, look how blue that has become. And it cools that off quite a bit. Now come back to the stronger part of the magenta. I'm going to put some of that magenta through here, some of these highlight areas, because they're catching also a little bit of the sky color. Just a little bit into this, very little bit into this yellow and down the center of it. Just a little bit, to create a little bit of a vibration, which gives it A little more sort of like, it dulls it, but at the same time it gives it a little bit more of an intensity to it. Tampers it down a little bit. And also, it works so well because you're dealing with complementary color. Now, I want to put a super highlight right there. So I'm going to mix up a white with a yellow, and I'm going to pick up just a touch of the magenta into that I have over here. Place that at the base of where this branch comes and separates it from the main trunk. Now see how I did? I placed this highlight here, but I carved out the base of that tree branch. So now it looks like it's coming out of there. I just soften it out so it doesn't jump too much. And all these little flecks of the complementary color make all the difference. Give it a little bit more snap. A little bit more of the cad yellow and white. And now I put that on the outside of that edge, which gives that magenta a little shimmer. Orange. There we go. Some branches that catch light. Secondary areas, and just trail off. Now I'm going to come with a cad red light and mix it into this. And do some of these. And you got to do it, you got to play with this stuff. And don't be afraid. It's not wrong or right. It's just how much and how far. And just make sure the marks that you make have an organic quality to them so they don't become mechanical. Look at trees. Spend some time looking at that so you get an idea how anatomy of a tree works. I love trees because to me, well, they're alive. They're some of the oldest living things on this planet. But they're also very people-like for me. They all have personalities. I love the seasons and changing cyclical things. And the anatomy of a tree is very much like a figure. To me, this is very much a portrait. Now, it just happens to be it's a tree, but to me, it's very much, it's a personality. And treat it like that. Now I want to go back and add some more vines coming in. This tree's got lots of them. So I want to start adding some of that through here. I'm going to come in with a cobalt blue into that magenta and make like a cool purple. A 10. I just want to state something real. I'm going to put a little magenta and cobalt blue here. And all I want to do is just try to just slightly, just redefine this out here just a touch. The brightest part of that area right there, just to give me a little bit more of a ground so it's not flat. And I'm introducing a little bit of green, just a little bit of that phthalo green into that, just a touch. See, now that just brings that little section a little bit closer. Okay. I'm just going to wipe that a little bit. There we go. Okay, now I want to do, I've got this going, some interesting color happening here, a little finessing in here, I can get to that. But this is bugging me big time, I gotta put that space in there. So what I'm gonna do, again, cobalt blue, some white, a little bit of the alizarin just to, still too bright. Cobalt blue, maybe terra rosa, take it down a bit. Following this line, too bright, cobalt blue, little umber, there we go, a little terra rosa, there we go. There, see it's more muted. I don't want it to be anywhere near as electric as that, but because it's on the shadow side, it's still brighter, but it's so much deeper than this. Okay. Now, go back to that Castile earth, and a little bit of the viridian to reestablish this trees that are over this. And now branches coming off of that. And then maybe just a slight indication of that coming down. So now we have some light there. I'm going to put this ground plane back. Okay. Now I'm going to pick up some umber, pick up this nasty brush again. Just a little bit of red into that. A little bit of this blue and orange, and all I want to do is I'm neutralizing this warm. Just want to lighten this just a little bit. Down in here. There we go. Now I'm going to include the shadow of that vine going across. See how that creates the illusion of a little bit of space from that to that. Now I'm going to make this just a little bit more strong, a little bit more powerful, with an orange and a yellow. Just ever so lightly. Now we're going to introduce some more of this. See that magenta, all I did was just drag in a little bit of that warmth in there, which makes that a little bit more mellow, just a tough on the edges. See, that's a nice shape now. I got to introduce some more of that going on over here. I have that coming across this branch down. I'm going to have some of this coming off of here. Random marks through here to create dimension. Now here, I want to do a bright spot of this orange right here. And what I'm going to do on that, I'm going to make this Terra Rosa come off of that. See, that shadow into here creates the feeling that branch is coming out of that. Okay, now I want to firm up the shadow side of this distant second tree. So to conceal earth, a little bit of blue. All I'm going to do is come back in here and just, by painting this, look how this pushes that tree back but brings this one forward. Look at that. Instant. It's a sharp edge, but what happens is, because the value is down, it stays fairly close, so it's not overpowering it. Strengthening some of this down in here. And now I'm going to, again, to the ground plane. This dark here helps push this, the contrast between here creates a piece for your eye to settle on. Softening. I'm going to come in with a little bit of this green. Out here, I'm going to put this branch that goes away. And as I come down, I'm going to restate the connections of some of these branches so it makes sense in this shape. Now I'm going to add to this a stronger shadow of something coming across that. And I want to always, the light in this is coming from behind me. So it's over my shoulder. So I want to include a very intense light down the middle of some of these forms to create that illusion of that's the highest highlight. And I only need to do that on the larger forms. Okay, more vines. I keep saying that, but I don't do it, so here we go. See, by bringing that vine across that dark, it helps also push that dark back. Magenta and white. Now I'm just looking for places that this makes sense. Now, if I wasn't painting this for this demonstration, I'm at a stage now where I could easily have put this away for a few days and then come back when things are dry and start to glaze and maneuver things, but we don't have that kind of time. So we'll just do this very much a direct painting. And it's fun to do this. It's working into wet paint has its own particular joy. I'm just going to start to push some of this around so we have some grasses that are catching some more of this light. Just to liven that up just a touch. Some of that grass comes across. Okay, I'm at a point in this painting where I could paint this for a little while longer or whatever, but I'm close enough that I'm just going to tell you right now what I want to do. And that way I'll go right at it and paint it and finish this up. I just need to, I want to add a couple more of these vines to give this dimension. I need to just do a couple of things up in here to give this a little more space, a little flat, and then just some of this ground plane. So I'm going to get to it. I'm not going to talk through this so I can get to it. Okay. I'm just gonna get rid of the glare. If I don't do that now, it'll always look bad when it's painted, when it's varnished. Okay, so the painting, for all intents and purposes, for this demonstration, is now done. And what I'm going to do now is basically I would let this dry for a day, 2, 3, 4, maybe a week. Sometimes I just put it away and let it go away for a month. That way it's out of mind. If it's out of sight, it's totally out of mind. I'll work on some other things, then pull it out, take a very fresh look at it with a very more critical eye, and determine what can I do? Do I need to do more? Which I probably will, I usually do. And that may include glazing, scumbling, so many other things with the surface, sanding back areas. All the bag of tricks come out. See, in alla prima painting, you're working wet into wet. There's very little you can do except edge control, wet into wet, dry, harden, all of that. Later is all the stuff that I enjoy the most. It's when you can abrade the surface, rethink it, manipulate it. Glazing is huge. So those are the kind of decisions I'll make. So hopefully that you enjoyed this, you got a lot from it. I hope you did. And look forward to the next one after this. Take care. Thanks.